So Pauline, Keith and I are together to discuss the reincarnation of the mathematical course that's been online. It's not a 1.2, it's actually the Introduction to Mathematical Thinking New and Improved.
Yeah, I would call it version 0.2. Okay. 0.1 was last September, this is 0.2. And we might reach a beta release version in a couple of years' time. But of course we are releasing it.
So is this a matter of you're deciding to change content, or is this the changes are more a response to learning about MOOCs as you go along?
Partly we're learning about, it's the same content in some sense. It's partly learning about MOOCs, and it's partly the feedback we got from the students the first time round. We got a lot of ideas for what we think might be improvements. We won't really know whether they're improvements till we run them out and test them.
Paul, what do you see as the big difference here between teaching the same content to a flesh and blood classroom with students in front of you?
There's a lot of differences. I think one of the biggest differences in a MOOC is the need to plan ahead. That in a normal classroom, you have a lot of opportunity to kind of change what you're doing dynamically in the moment. Whereas in a MOOC, you kind of have to have everything set and ready to go before the course even begins. And that's where the second version, we can make all of these changes that we kind of thought up as we were going the first time. And it's like, oh, well, we can't put that in right now because the course is already running. But now we have a chance to put some of those things in.
So can you give me an example of one of the key changes you've made, Keith?
One change, and this is the most obvious one to the students, is last fall it was a 7-week course. This week I've taken the same material and spread it over 10 weeks because I got a lot of feedback from students who were clearly motivated, dedicated, were doing fine, but they had lives to live. They weren't full-time students, and they would say, look, I got to week 5 and I had to go on a business trip, and there were 2 lectures in week 5. If there'd been 1 lecture in week 5, I could have caught up at the end of the week, but there were 2 lectures, I had to drop out. And so what I'm doing is I'm giving the first 2 weeks, there are 2 lectures a week because it's very introductory. From week 3 onwards, there's only 1 lecture a week. So someone who has to miss a couple of days because they've got some commitment will have time to catch up.
And that was borne out by some of the survey data we collected. The median age in the last course was in people in their mid-30s. So it's not just high schoolers or early college students who want to explore this area. We have a lot of students who are professionals who want to come back and look at this kind of stuff that maybe they had to drop when they were in college or they never got a chance to explore. So it's a very different kind of population than a traditional college.
Although it's almost counterintuitive that it would take more weeks to do it, because you figure if it's an online course and you don't have to be there at 3 p.m. on Thursday, you have all day Thursday to go check in there, you'd almost think it would go faster. The freedom in the scheduling.
Not with this kind of a course, because and I kept telling my students this, I kept putting it out on my blogs and so forth, that the bit that they see on the video, the bit that's actually online, that just sets the stage, because learning mathematics at this level involves a lot of thinking on your own and a lot of talking with other people and struggling to master material. So you could maybe watch a 30-minute video that I give. It may take you 2 or 3 hours of intense thinking off and on to make sense of that thing. So in fact, I describe my role as really the conductor of an orchestra. I decide which tune they're going to play, I raise the baton, and I leave them to work, and I go off and have a cup of coffee somewhere, and then come back later and see how they're doing and checking in, because it's really for them to learn. I'm not really teaching, I'm just setting the stage so they can learn. So there's a lot of time they need to make sense of what I managed to get through in 30 minutes on video.
And it gives a little more flexibility having the course be over 10 weeks. Even for people who could do it faster, they can still they can still work fairly quickly in that 10 weeks. And then, Keith, one of the things Keith says throughout the videos is you have to do this slowly, you have to take your time, you have to think about it. So even people who are getting it and who are going quickly can still benefit from having that extra time, I think.
So having had your base in physical, right there education, what's been your biggest shock? What's been your biggest lesson?
Oh, wow. There were lots of little shocks, I think. The thing that comes to mind is actually not a shock, because I expected it was going to happen, but I was sort of surprised when it really did. I love teaching one-on-one with the students. I love teaching students in groups of maybe 5 to 10. Bring it up to 20. I always try to cap my classes at 20 when I give physical classes. I've taught classes of 250 and 300. That's the worst possible, because there's no contact. It's just an audience. They're basically just wallpaper around the room, and they're all on Facebook at the same time anyway. So there's no contact. You would think 65,000 students, even worse. It's not 65,000 students. It's 65,000 individual students. Teaching on a MOOC is one-on-one. You have a student sitting next to you. In fact, if someone watches my course, you occasionally see my face, but that's just to make human contact. Mostly what you see is that hand and a piece of paper. The way I record them is an overhead camera at my desk at home, piece of paper, talking to a student that in my mind is sitting next to me, and in conversational terms, going through some mathematics. Now, the student can't answer back in real time, which is a big problem.
Yes.
And we can come to that, and people like Paul are going to try and help me to compensate for that. But it's basically sitting next to the professor and talking to the professor and trying to understand what's going on. In other words, in a MOOC, you're teaching one student.
Well, Paul, when you talk about the logistics of that, I mean, when you have a teacher who's actually online on that time, changing things or just putting it up, isn't there a natural advantage for the student who's likewise online at exactly the same time and doesn't have that delayed reaction of 10 hours later coming along and seeing basically a canned lesson instead of a live lesson?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think that there's, from the video perspective, since the videos are all kind of pre-recorded, I don't know if there's too much of a difference. Certainly, within the forums, there are times where, like, Keith or I will be logged into the forums, and if somebody posts a question right then that one of us can address, there could be some advantage there. But actually, I think our experience was in the first course, we actually, I think, intentionally tried to stay out of the forum, like answering questions right away until there had been a fair amount of discussion, or if it felt like it had gotten to a point that it was an unproductive disagreement. But there's actually so much value in staying out of the way and letting the students discuss with each other in the forums. And our experience was, I mean, people post in the forums, and there's going to be a response within 10 minutes, 15 minutes, almost every time.
I'm expecting two kinds of people to come. I know there were a lot of people who took the last course and had to bail, and some who took the last course and finished but didn't do as well as they thought, who've already emailed me and said that they're definitely coming back and they'd like to try it again. So I'm expecting those to come back, and they will see some changes. There have been some changes. They would be unwise to be seduced by the fact that things look remarkably the same in the first couple of weeks, because they do change as we move on. There's a difference in emphasis in the way some of the material is presented and some of the things I'm asking them to do. Then they'll realise that as they go through it. And for people who are doing it the first time, you've got the benefit of the fact that we have now learned from our mistakes last time. It's going to be better than last time. Last time I went into it thinking, if we don't totally fail, crash and burn, it's a success.
Yes.
So by that measure, it was a success. We've set ourselves a standard now. It was okay last time. It was actually one of the most successful courses that Coursera had put on at the time. It was the second highest grossing in terms of students that they'd had.
Not
so
bad.
it was doing pretty well. That may be the math guy thing that helped there, but it did pretty well. But that set us a bar, and we now definitely, I mean, I will be disappointed if we don't exceed that bar.
An individual can feel so involved and so personally invested that they would literally contact the instructor and say, I'm coming back.
Yeah, no, they are, I mean, and in a sense, we set them up for doing that, because one of the things I tried to convey was getting a sense of me as a person. You know, I actually appear on camera, and I didn't have to. I could have done it like Khan Academy, where you never see the person involved. I wanted them to get a sense of me, because mathematics is dry, abstract, decontextualized. I think you need a person to make contact of. You know, I was their friendly grandfather or uncle or whatever it was. I thought that was really important. But if you watch what I'm doing, I'm actually not teaching. I'm not telling them any material. I'm talking about the course. I'm trying to motivate them. I'm the coach, if you like, saying, you know, you can do this, keep at it. And it was making human contact. You know, I recorded in the studio, into camera, eye contact. But that was all about making contact with a human being. The moment we start talking about mathematics, I drop out and there's just my hand there. So it was all about making that human contact. So not surprisingly, they did feel and responded. They feel they knew me. That was the trick. You know, it's like everybody knows the newsreader on their favourite TV channel.
Right.
It's a member of the family because they're in your living room every night at 6 o'clock. That's powerful.
That's
and
wonderful.
I wanted to use that.
Yeah, that's actually a high compliment.
And for all of the emails that you got telling you people would come back, the posts, we did a survey at the end of the course last time, and I would say there must have been hundreds and hundreds of people in the post survey in the free response. Instead of giving feedback on the course, they said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't finish. I'm going to do it better next time." Like, I mean, it was amazing that, I mean, so many people wanted. I think they felt that personal connection in such a way that they didn't want to let us down by not finishing the course.
That's what education's about. The teacher, you know, teachers don't really teach. What they do is they inspire students to learn. I don't think I can teach anybody anything. The best I can hope is to inspire them to learn, because learning is the active thing. I don't know what teaching is in some sense, except inspiration. And so I see my role as to inspire them. And in a sense, it's an easy one because I love the subject and I like to inspire people. You know, I mean, you have to fake a lot in a medium.
Right.
But what you're not faking is your love of the subject.
Yeah, or you wouldn't be there.
And that you're going to be there. So I was very gratified that they contacted me because it meant that much had worked. The one thing I couldn't do, which I love doing with real students, is when they come into your office, as they do all the time, and you talk to them. That's missing.
Yeah.
For those of us giving them, there's a lot of interesting upsides. The big downside is you never get to know the students. And we wouldn't be in the business if we didn't like getting to know students. Actually, I've had some professors I'm a little bit suspicious about, but most of us love this.
There's one in every crowd. Well, thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you.
Much.
Yeah.